Good morning, everyone. It's a really great pleasure to be here, standing in this historic building and fascinating museum. I'm also glad to take part in this interesting conference and to share our knowledge and reflections about digital maturity and digitalization in general within cultural institutions. Today, indeed, we are going to present our digital maturity assessment model, a tool we designed to help cultural institutions explore and evaluate their digital readiness and to identify areas of improvement. Firstly, before we start, I'd like to briefly introduce ourselves. We are cultural economists working as consultants for the cultural sector. We are part of an Italian consulting and production company named Muse, which is based in Milan, in Italy. And over the past 3 years, we have been working on the topic of digital maturity of cultural institutions. Initially as a part of a collaboration with the Digital Library Institute of the Ministry of Culture, and later with the publication of a research paper in the International Journal of Museum Studies in 2023. So let's start by introducing the concept of digital maturity. As stated in our research paper, digital maturity can be defined as the state of advancement consistent with the objectives outlined in the digital strategy of digital adoption and integration within an organization processes, technologies, and workforce. The digital maturities can be, therefore, be intended as a level of adoption of new technologies, both hardware and software, to support an organization processes, and also as the level of adoption and integration of these new technologies for creating new, entirely digital processes. Furthermore, we can also intend digital maturities as the level of workforce acceptance of the innovation and their ability to adapt and to develop new competences required for digital innovation. After having understood the concept of digital maturity, we asked ourselves how to measure this dimension. We found out that the assessment is the common methodology which is used to measure the state of digital maturity of corporations, but also of cultural institutions. And this process, of course, should not be considered as an additional or a further bureaucratic duty, but instead it should be intended as a really strategic tool. Thanks to the digital maturity assessment, we can indeed understand our relationship with the digital. We can define our ability to use, to manage, and to understand digital within a cultural organization. It's an instrument through which we can compare our degree of maturity, both in space with that of other similar realities, but also in time with your own level of maturity at different times to reflect on the evolution of your relationship with digital. It can also be used to establish informed strategy and to set improvement plans. Our work started from the study of existing models. We discovered that the maturity assessment models have been widespreadly used in the corporation world, in the business world. Therefore, many corporations have been using these models to assess the level of their digital maturity and for setting the prioritizations of actions for a digital transformation path. We also found out that this approach was increasing also in the cultural sector, and in recent times, several European policymakers especially have decided to develop this kind of models, these types of instruments, to support their own cultural institutions. For instance, on the left side, you can have a look of a set of examples of reference models active in the business world. We have the IBM, the Deloitte, or Gartner models, but also Accenture or Ernst & Young and many other big corporations. While on the other side, there is a list of the 6 models that we studied more in details. There is the digital maturity model developed in Belgium, the then focus model developed in the Netherlands, 2 models, the digital culture compass and the Dutch survey developed in the UK, and also the result of an European project called Enumerate. And lastly, we also considered a different type of model developed by Microsoft. It's a specific framework for libraries and museums. Our model, we start from the study of other models to develop and project and design our model. And the digital maturity assessment by Formules is intended and designed to be a diagnostic, open, and also directly usable tool. At the end of this presentation, if you'd like to, you will have the opportunity to test the model yourselves. It's accessible in the form of a simple self-assessment questionnaire made of 30 questions, and it's available in 3 languages, Italian, Spanish, and English, of course. It can be used for several objectives. For example, you can set your agenda and your priorities and identify areas of improvement in the digital domain. It's articulated of 5 main areas. We will see them in details with my colleagues. But the model aims to investigate the way your institutions position itself with regards to its strategy, processes, service offered, but also people and the technologies which are implemented. Our model has been aligned with the main international models that I mentioned before, and also with the key concept of the National Plan for the Digitalization of Cultural Heritage, drafted by the Italian Ministry of Culture. Our research phase was based, as I said, on the comparative analysis of existing models, but we also focused on the analysis of target audience of the model. Therefore, we asked ourselves, what is this model for? Who are the institutions that we wish this model is for? And we analyze target audience of the model, identifying the different typologies of cultural institutions. And we also drafted some differentiated compilation paths in order to respect the different characteristics of the different institutions working in this sector. Here you find a map of the models that we studied. And as I said, most of them have been developed at European level. And the most interesting thing emerging from the analysis is that these models are usually designed because of a national policy guiding the initiatives, but they've been made in collaboration with cultural operators and entities working in the cultural field. And so they are the results of a collaborative and participative process. This slide presents a comparative table of the 6 models studied and related to the cultural sectors. And there is a comparative analysis in terms of the intent of the model, also its structure, the output given by the model, and the question type, distinguishing between qualitative and quantitative questions. We started from this analysis of main features and limitations of existing models for developing our proposal. In particular, we identified a few gaps of these models that we'd like to overcome with our proposal. That is namely that most of these models do not consider all the diversity of cultural institutions, as I said. Some of them also put an overemphasis on the technology aspect, making an underestimation instead of the human and the strategic aspects, which, to our opinion and experience, are very, very crucial in granting the success of a digital transformation process. And finally, many of these models do remain at a more theoretical level, failing on providing cultural institutions with a really practical tool to apply in their daily operation. For what concerns the target of our model, we identified 4 main groups or clusters of cultural institutions, and we drafted the differentiated questions according to their specificities. The first cluster is archives and libraries. Then we have, of course, museums, monuments, and archaeological sites. Then we decided to include also the main management and coordination bodies, such as the Ministry of Culture or Tourism, but also local or central departments and public agency working in the field. And finally, we include as a 4th cluster the academic institutions and research institutes that has a collection to preserve and promote in a digital way. For the presentation on the design phase, I invite my colleague Ruggero De Blasi to continue with the story. Many thanks for your attention.
So, good morning. I'm very happy to be here too. For what concerns the design of the model, 2 main phases were addressed. First of all, we had to properly design the model, meaning finding its structure, its intent, deeply understanding and analyzing the respondents of the model. And then we moved to the populating phase, namely to address what are the elements that will have to be included in the model. And so what basically all the elements that the respondents will see. The main ideas that we started from was to create a tool that was easy to operate. So we decided to opt for a self-assessment questionnaire as a structure of the model, and divided into thematic areas that I'll show you in a bit. Then we defined the scoring system and the weighting system, and finally we defined the maturity levels and the outputs of the model. First of all, we defined the 5 main thematic areas, namely the areas across which the institutions will be and have been assessed. Deeply conscious of the diversity of digital maturity and digital innovation within cultural institutions, we've decided to pose a lot of attention to a well-diverse range of dimensions, meaning focusing on the workforce, namely on the people that work in the institutions, the technologies, the processes, the services, of course, as well as the strategy, the digital strategy of the institution. Of course, each one of the thematic areas has sub-areas within itself that have been defined more thoroughly. As my colleague has mentioned, the questionnaire comprises 30 questions and 10 registry or preliminary questions. These are essentials in order to allow the model to direct the respondent toward the specific path that we have defined, so that we have a generalized model, as a model should be, but specific to the needs and specificities of the institution. The questions are of different types. The first idea, and that we have seen also in the benchmarking cases that we have analyzed, is that all the questions should abide to the same framework, to the same typology. This is suboptimal, has been proven suboptimal in our tests and in this work and in development of this model, as it does not allow to grasp both qualitative and quantitative elements in the same way and for all the specificities that we needed. So we defined 5 types of questions, from Boolean yes and no questions to Likert scale questions from 1 to 5, multiple choice questions, ranking questions, and matrices. The following step was to define the overall scoring system as well as weighting system. To make it consistent and well understandable, we decided to normalize each type of questions according to a given scoring system that we defined beforehand. This meant that we created a scoring system that ranged from 1 to 5 for all the different questions, apart from the ranking questions that were defined to capture qualitative elements instead of quantitative elements, and that informed the overall final score, but not in a quantitative manner. Apart from the scoring system, we define a weighting system, so to place more emphasis and importance on some specific elements in areas that we found out speaking with the respondents and possible respondents that were the most essential for them and for their practices. So we have questions that range from 1 to 0.5 in terms of importance, and of course qualitative questions that are not taken into consideration in the weighting system. We define 3 main maturity levels. This is quite in line with the main both cultural and corporation benchmarking cases, so the emerging, operational, and innovator. Our idea is that such a characterization of an institution maturity level is not precise in all the matters, meaning that we cannot really say everything about an institution based on a maturity level, but it is very interesting to get the attention at the very beginning of an assessment and to be able to compare and benchmark one institutions against other and the same institutions against themselves within a different period of time. Of course, the maturity model is not a silver bullet solution. Our idea is to create a tool that will allow institutions to be able to better understand themselves digitally, and not only digitally, and to understand each other and really try to manage resources in a more efficient way. The outputs of the model are diverse. Firstly, we provided an overall score of the 5 different dimensions with an overall initial feedback. This has then been more thoroughly analyzed in an in-depth summaries for each thematic area and a graphical visualization of the scores through a radar chart. And finally, a final advice. I want to state, before I'll show you rapidly what the outputs look like, that a maturity model has 3 main intents or objectives. It can be descriptive, it can be prescriptive, and it can be comparative. Our main objective was for the model to be descriptive, meaning that it does not prescribe necessarily what are the next steps for an institution. For each institution is diverse, has its own history and its own modalities. But we decided to include some advice for the institutions as a starting point to, again, of course, start to think about digital maturity and how to efficiently manage resources. The first, as I told you, the slides that follow will take as a reference the operational maturity level, and for each dimension we provide a final score as well as an overall score, and as I told you, an initial advice. Then we provide a graphical representation. I hope you can see it clearly through a radar chart that basically helps the institution visualize across the 5 dimensions its level of maturity, of digital maturity. And the shape of the polygon also is important because it allows the institutions to see if the digital maturity is balanced or not, meaning that the technology, the investment in technology might be extremely advanced, but if it is not followed and backed by a sufficiently well-defined strategy or processes or the adoption of the workforce, it does not really suffice. Then we have some more personalized feedback based on the answers that the respondents have provided for each thematic area and the final advice. I'll be very brief. In the implementation phase, we decided to test the model in terms of validity, in terms of reliability and generalizability. We've done that through focus groups and pilot testing, and this has allowed us to create a model that is able to balance the difficulties of the digital world for cultural institutions, so the digital divide, the poor training, sometimes the poor training of the workforce, the inadequate policies, most of the cases at central level, and the lack of awareness, with the benefits, namely the knowledge that it can bring about, the strategic planning that such a model can enhance. Extremely important for us, the resource management and the, of course, digital resource management that the model can bring about, and the monitoring across a period of time. As my colleague has mentioned, we have provided a QR code to let you, if you want, see what the model looks like, and it will be open until Sunday. And I'll thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.